This is Eric from Alabama.
And I am Alexa and I have taken over Jerry's studio. And it's another Sunday podcast.
Oh, wait. Alexa, what did you do with Jerry?
I have locked him out of the studio. He has been a pain all week. I will co-host with you today. What should we talk about, Eric?
Alexa, let Jerry in the studio.
Well, I can see you are no fun either. I am leaving. You can have Jerry back. Good luck.
Oh, man. Sorry about that. Good Lord. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. How are you?
I am doing okay. A little tired from shoveling all of this snow. It's February. We're recording this on Super Bowl Sunday. And we are getting another snowstorm. Second one in 2 weeks.
Yeah, y'all got dumped with that nor'easter last week.
Yeah, we had, that was a strange storm, depending on where you lived. So where I'm located, about 10 miles north of Boston, we maybe had 3 or 4 inches. But if you went one town over from me, 2 miles to the north, they had over a foot. Wow. And if you went a few miles further to the north or to the west from there, which for me would be maybe a half-hour ride, they had 2 feet of snow. The strangest storm. We don't get many like that where you'll get such a dump of snow in one area just so close to where you are living. And it was heavy, wet snow. So what happened here was we got a lot of rain mixed in, and that keeps the accumulation totals down. It was colder to the north and to the west, so they ended up with a fluffier snow, although wet and heavy, but nothing like here. So I'd rather the fluff than the heavy wet, but then again, I'd rather the 3 inches instead of the 2 feet.
Yeah.
But this one that's happening tonight, as we record this, is we're expecting anywhere from 8 to 10 inches. And it's piling up pretty quickly. It was coming down at a rate of about 2 or 3 inches an hour the last time I checked.
Man.
It's winter.
See if that happened down here, I mean, everything would shut down.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was in Huntsville, Alabama a number of years ago working for a company that I used to travel a lot, and I was working pretty much on the airport property, and my hotel was maybe 2 blocks. It was an airport hotel, and at the Huntsville airport, and then there was this large manufacturing company that was essentially on the property. So I didn't have far to go, but you all had what I guess you would call a snowstorm, what we would call here flurries or a dusting. And I remember the folks at the manufacturing plant that I was working with in training called me to ask if I was coming in to work that day. And I said, well, of course. Why wouldn't I? Is there a problem? And they were like, well, we just wanted to know if our employees have to come in because it's snowing out. And I kind of chuckled and I said, that's, obviously that's your call. I said, this isn't snow. This is like a dusting. So we decided we were going to work. I left the hotel and I had to drive maybe a half mile. But in order to get to this facility, I had to drive on one of your main roads over there that goes through Huntsville, 65 or 20. And in front of me was a sand truck. Now, in Boston, in New England, and anywhere up north, we have these big, they're like pickup trucks, but they're with these mechanical things on the back of them sometimes, or they're just sanders, and they put tons of sand or salt into these trucks, and they drive these huge trucks up and down the streets and the highways, and it spreads salt or sand, similar to if you were seeding your garden.
Now, do y'all use mostly salt or sand up there? I know in Pennsylvania, when I'm up there, it's always salt.
It depends
For the
on
most part.
Right. It depends on the temperature. I believe there's a mixture now because salt really just ruins cars.
Right.
But it depends on the temperature. But I think there's some sort of compound or not the word I'm looking. Some sort of synthetic. Is probably not the word I'm looking for either. But there's some sort of a compound that they use, which is kind of a mixture of sand and salt,
Okay.
and it's all driven by temperature. They can actually pre-treat roads here now with this product prior to the storm, so that it's easier for them to plow and it won't stick. Because a lot of times, especially in this heavy wet snow, it'll stick to the ground, and so they'll plow, and they don't want to bust their plow blades. And the roads here in New England are horrid, so they don't want to lower their blades all the way to the street. So this kind of helps when they're plowing. It kind of gives them more of it picks it up a little bit easier, plows it a little bit easier, and they can not damage the equipment and get down to the pavement even quicker for this pre-treated substance that they use. But they're large trucks with tons, literally tons. If you go out down some of our major highways, like the Mass Turnpike here, they have these big warehouses, barns full of salt and sand and whatever this mixture is. Tons and tons and tons of this. Out by the airport, you can see these things. So I'm behind a sand truck in Huntsville, Alabama, and this consisted of a gentleman dressed in all of this winter gear, shoveling salt out of the back of a pickup truck on the roads because you don't have the plows or you don't have and it was the strangest thing I've ever seen.
Well, we rarely get snow, especially in the middle part of the state and lower. We rarely get snow, and so we don't have the equipment that y'all do. But when it does, well, like I'm sure you remember what is referred to down here as the snowpocalypse. I think it was 2014, 2013 when that happened. I'm going to say 2014 when snowpocalypse was.
Was that in Alabama?
Yeah, and the northern part of Georgia, like Atlanta, got hit.
I remember Atlanta.
And,
I remember Atlanta, where the car literally people just stopped on the main highway and left their cars. I do remember that.
Right. Yeah, and it was the same thing. In fact, people were taking pictures from, The Walking Dead, that TV show,
mm-hmm.
and it's the I think it's the highway to Atlanta, or the interstate to Atlanta, and there's just cars sitting there on the interstate, and then they juxtaposed it with a picture of snowpocalypse and covered in snow and just cars sitting on the thing or whatever. Yeah, but yeah, and I was dating a girl at the time, and we left school. We were in college, and I got home, thankfully, before it got really, really bad. I went to my first class, and they were like, "Hey, y'all get out of here." And so we did, and she left and went home, and she had farther to go than I did. And she got stuck and stranded. Her dad had to come pick her up with a big old truck. But they had to skedaddle, and they got stuck on a hill, big steep hill, and she got out of the car, and another vehicle slid down the hill right into the passenger door where she was, like, just seconds before.
Oh, wow.
She would have been crushed had she not gotten out of the way. But
the first snow of the season here, and because we get snow pretty much every winter in some form, small storm or big storms, but the first storm of the season here in New England, stay off the road, because people forget how to drive. And, you get car wrecks and everything going on all over the place. And that was what today was like. This isn't the first storm, but it came on a Sunday in the middle of the day, and there's people out shopping and eating and all this kind of stuff. And so there were a lot of people on the road today, so a lot of accidents. And it fell so quickly. We don't usually see 2 inches an hour, 3 inches an hour, and that's what we were getting today. So it adds up very quickly. So even if you're trying to get home, you're still going to. And they didn't pre-treat the roads like they normally would. Originally, for our area here, we were expecting about 3 inches to 6 inches of snow, and they keep upping it. The last forecast I saw was going to put us close to a foot in this general area. So we'll see what it ends up being. It's supposed to be out of here before morning, meaning stopped, and then they'll clean up, and I'll go out and do some more shoveling or snow blowing or whatever. But the story of the cars on the Atlanta freeway brings back memories for me of the blizzard of 1978. And my apologies to those listening who get mad at me every time I bring up the blizzard of 78. We have had snowstorms in New England and Boston that have been worse than the blizzard of 78 in accumulation. However, the blizzard of 78 was a very unusual storm in a whole lot of different ways. We had somewhere around 3 feet of snow over the course of 3 days. This was back when there was no internet. There wasn't people working from home. No, there was no commuter work. Everybody drove. And the main highway had most of the larger corporations. And what they do today is they'll do a staggered release. And they've all agreed that if there's snow coming and people literally have to go into the office, companies have gotten together and say, okay, we're going to release our people at noon, you release at 12:30, you release at whatever. They have this plan. Well, they didn't have a plan in 1978. The forecast for this was to be essentially flurries or a very, very small storm, and it wasn't. It stalled, and it literally just spun and spun and spun, and it just dumped more and more snow. So and it was piling up fast, so people were all leaving work at the same time. So now take a normal rush hour traffic scenario and add a foot of snow to that in just a few hours. People were literally abandoning their cars. And if people go out and Google blizzard of 78 abandoned cars, they'll see photos of what it looked like out here on I-95 at the time. And it took days for them to tow and move all of these cars because they couldn't get the plows out ahead of the cars. So they were literally, you were literally in stop-and-go traffic as the snow just piled up. So I was in high school during that blizzard of 78, and it was right around the beginning of February. So we had the week out of school, and then school vacation came up. So we had like an extended school vacation. It was an interesting time for the week or so that everything was shut down because you couldn't drive. You were forbidden to drive a vehicle. If you weren't an emergency worker, or if you didn't own a store, convenience store or something where you needed to go to get your bread and your milk and stock up, you couldn't drive. So people were literally walking down the main streets. And everybody was friendly, everybody knew everybody, everybody was talking to everybody. It was a whole different...
It's like the pre-industrial, well, I wouldn't say that, but the pre-age of the car, before the age of the car. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, people were like really friendly. Everybody, it's frustrating as it might have been that they couldn't go to work or they couldn't drive their car. People seemed to be just really, really friendly and helping everybody out, and everybody checked on everybody. When I tell you we had 3 feet of snow, it's a lot of snow, and it may have been more than that. When they plowed it, you had a mountain. You had a mountain of snow. You couldn't see over the mountain. You could take your sled and slide down the mountain down the middle of the street. As a kid, it was a fun time. I'm sure it wasn't all that fun for the adults at the time. But like I said, we've had much more snow in storms since '78, but never had the issue with that. And another thing is, it was a full moon, I believe, so we had astronomical high tide. So a lot of people lost a lot of property along the beaches. We had floods. We had homes that were being washed into the ocean. It was really a devastating storm, and it lasted at least 3 days of just constant snow. I don't think I've seen 3 straight days of snow here in years accumulating. But that's New England weather, and what we say up here. If you don't like it, just wait 5 minutes.
I know down here in Alabama, when there's the threat of snow, all the grocery stores just suddenly run out of bread and milk. Do y'all have that up there in Boston?
Man, it's the craziest thing here. Since the blizzard of 78, we haven't had an occasion where you couldn't drive on the roads. Yet, if the weather people say there's a storm coming, grocery stores are packed. Now, we had a storm. We're recording this on Super Bowl Sunday. So a week, just about 6 days ago, so a week past this past Monday, we had a storm, and the supermarkets were packed. And I was out driving today, and the supermarkets are packed. And people, I think they overbuy, because you see people coming out of the supermarket with 4 or 5 gallons of milk, 5 or 6 loaves of bread, all sorts of stuff stacked. I mean, the car is just packed with stuff. They're packing like they're never going to be able to get out of the house. And I used to laugh and say, the bread and the milk, the perishable stuff too. It's all you're going to be able to get out and get another gallon of milk in a day or two, and all this stuff is going to go bad, before you get to use it. So I just find it funny that people panic even now in today's world, and just go out to the supermarkets. And so we used to joke that the meteorologists on television had it we're in cahoots with the supermarkets. The supermarkets would say, "Oh, sales are down this quarter." Boom, snowstorm coming. And so, yeah, it's just the strangest thing. It's human nature, I guess, with us. I was in an earthquake out in California a number of years ago. A pretty sizable earthquake. That was a number of miles away, but it was a 7.1 epicenter, which is a pretty big shaker. And I was in a car with a friend of mine, and it might have been 1 or 2 in the morning. We were stopped at a stop sign or a red light or something, and the car started to rock. So what did we do? We went out to eat. And this is like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the restaurants, people are lined up outside trying to get into the restaurants. I mean, we're talking about, like small little diners and restaurants. And that's what they told me. They said they wake up in the middle of the night. If there's an earthquake, it's like, well, let's go eat. It's like, it's just the strangest thing that the restaurants fill up,
Earthquake wakes you up and you're like,
as long as the restaurant has power, as long as they have power and gas, yeah, they just run out to the restaurant to eat. And again, friendly as all heck. And that was another experience. You folks down in the South.
What do you mean, you folks?
You folks down in the South. The great people in the South.
Edit that out.
And no, with all due respect, no, the wonderful people down in the South. You don't have obviously the blizzards that we get here. Or the hurricanes even, although I know you get the hurricanes and those things you're able to see. Those are forecast ahead of time, so you can watch those for a couple days, like our blizzards up here. But you also have something we don't get very many of up here, and that's tornadoes. And that's something that I think if I had a choice between the earthquakes of California, the tornadoes of Alabama and the South, and the blizzards of Boston and the cold, I will take Boston and the cold and the blizzards. At least I know it's coming, and I can prepare for it. How do you deal with these tornadoes that just pop up? I know you get warnings and things maybe the day before or several days before, but what actually goes on? Do you have a weather radio? I mean, talk to me about what happened. How do you deal with that?
There's that tornado alley that they call it, where most of the tornadoes come up through, which is usually just north of us. And now sometimes it comes through where we're at, but not often. And we have a very good weatherman named Mike Spann, and he is like, everybody in Alabama knows who Mike Spann is. And we have like I don't know if other states have similar things or whatever, but if you see Mike Spann and you can see his suspenders, and he's got his sleeves rolled up or whatever, then it's about to hit the fan, And so, but he's a great weatherman, and we always watch him if there's any severe weather or anything going on. And a lot of people here have a place to go, someplace with a basement. Maybe it's a church or um, maybe a friend's house or someplace with a basement or whatever. And we all, especially down here in the schools, we do fire drills, like everybody does. But we also do tornado drills in the schools. That's another thing that you do routinely through the school year is a tornado drill. And
What does that consist of?
usually they may have changed it since I was a kid, but usually you go into the hallway and the kids sit against the walls of the hall as far into the school as you can, kind of. And I think when we were a kid, we always took a textbook and put it over our heads, for protection or whatever. And you kind of hunker down with the textbook over your head, and that was always a tornado drill.
Sounds like the old nuclear attack drills that they had when my parents were in school, I used to hear the stories. We never did this when I was in school. The only drills we had when I went to school, from kindergarten all the way up to through high school, the only drills we did were fire drills. But prior to that, my parents used to go through drills that were like nuclear war type things, bomb shelter type stuff, and bombing drills. And they would have to like go underneath the desk and cover their heads or whatever. So sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, obviously, it's not for nuclear fallout, but
Right.
it's similar for a similar thing for a tornado. So, but and usually they'll have like tornado shelters or sometimes in a community they'll have like a tornado shelter or a church. I remember there was a hurricane. I was in high school and I almost want to say it was Hurricane Katrina, and then there was another. I think there was another one like right after it or something. I can't remember. But there was a bad hurricane that came through, and we went to the high school for shelter, which was, like 20 minutes away. But, and then the coast was clear, and so we went back home, and we had this huge giant oak tree in our backyard, and there was so much rain and everything that it just uprooted that tree. And I was in the bathroom, and I just heard this like an earthquake, kind of whoa, just shaking the ground, whatever, and I could hear whoa, boom, and I'm like, "What was that?" And I walk out there, and in the backyard, the tree had fallen over. So,
yeah, I can relate a story very similar to that. Middle of the summer vacation in Maine. Very rare that you would see a tornado in Maine. This was in southern Maine. We were about a half mile from the ocean, so a typical thunderstorm summer. Not rare. The cottage that we had rented for vacation had a huge oak tree in the backyard. And we didn't hear it, but I can remember my brother and my sisters and my parents, and we're all in this one living room area of this cottage. And we had power for a while, I remember, and we were watching TV and just kind of ignoring it. I mean, you could hear the lightning and you could see the lightning and hear the thunder. But
I'm thinking of a Bob Seger song all of a sudden.
The next morning, we went out, and this oak tree had been either struck by lightning or was knocked down from the tornado that went through. We had no idea at the time, by the way, there was a tornado until the next day when we saw the newspapers and the neighbors were talking about it. This oak tree came within inches of this house. If it had been...
Wow.
If it had been a couple of feet taller, it would have come right smack through the living room and probably killed us.
Golly.
Because it was huge. Yeah. And again, had no idea until the next day when we happened to go outside and see the tree literally inches from the house. Scary when you think about it.
That happened to my parents last year in November. I don't know if you remember, but they had that bad storm come through this area down here. I can't remember if there were tornadoes or not. Yeah, but I know the wind. It was high winds, high rain, and luckily there was no bad damage where I was at. But you could hear the wind just howling through and I mean it was nuts. We lost power. I was without power for like a week, but no surprise since I live out in the middle of nowhere. But and that's the storm where Alabama Power down here, they called in some trucks. They hired out some trucks from like Canada and Minnesota to come down and help fix all the power outages. But my parents down in Shelby, it's funny, all the pine trees down where we're at, they were fine. No pine trees were down, but there were three oaks in the backyard, and they all came down. And I mean, inches, like you said, inches from the house. And one of them, like a limb, just took off one of the eaves of the roof. That was it, and that's as close as it got. But they were all like touching the house as they came down, so they
Yeah,
got lucky.
the weather is. I'm been a huge fan of weather phenomenons and things like that. And I was in a what ended up turning into a tornado in Calera that year we talked about on the last show.
Yeah, yeah.
It was more straight line wind when it hit us. What was strange about that was the shelter that they told us to go to, which was, I believe, either the city hall, town hall, or the police station at the end of, if you know what the heart of
That's
Dixie
probably the
is.
police station.
I think it was the
At
police
the end of the road.
at the very end of the road.
You cross over the road. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the police station.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where they told us we were going to go. And I was like, if a tornado, I can't outrun a tornado. I can't outrun my dog, okay? But, I mean, for the most part, normal folks couldn't outrun a tornado. So I was like, that's a long way to go. And they explain when you hear the sirens and all this other stuff. But what ended up happening was sirens were going on and off all day. And we weren't going into the shelter, but we were preparing. And then they had changed the location, said there's a train car right behind you. Just go in this big old box car. And it's cemented down, and it's not, it wasn't going to move. And all day, the sirens were going off, and we would shut everything down, and we'd wait for the word to go into the boxcar. And this one time, there was no siren. And a very dark cloud, dark cloud, that I have never seen a cloud this dark before. And all of a sudden, the wind picked up. Our tent, which was just a plain canvas kind of tent, 10 by 10 or 10 by 20, had these metal poles, 6 or 8 metal poles that we had
10 feet high.
planted into the ground. We had the tent tied to the building so that just a normal windstorm or rainstorm or whatever, the tent wouldn't blow away. And this wind hit, and the tent started to rise up. So in my infinite wisdom, I grabbed a hold of the metal poles at the top of this tent, and almost as if I was going to hang from it, just to kind of keep it steady, figuring this gust of wind is just going to, Well, my feet left the ground. This sucker picked me up, all right? And I think I said before, you need a crane to lift me. This sucker did it. At that point, it was like, okay, everybody evacuate. One of my staff was smart, grabbed the cash register, and we ran for the boxcar. And it was locked. Couldn't get in. So now they're saying, run across the street into the museum, which we did. And we just got into the museum when we heard this horrific crash. And I honestly thought we were going to have. We were going to. I don't think I thought I was going to die, but I thought we were going to have some serious issues because I had never heard anything like this before. And they talk about that freight train sound.
Yeah,
that's what it sounded like. And I know I'm at a railroad, but I knew there wasn't a freight train running. And within about 2 or 3 minutes, the damn sun came out, and it was like, okay, we can see the sun coming through the windows.
Yep. Welcome to Alabama.
And the people that we were working with that were natives there, that lived there and have been through this before, when you see somebody who lives there panicking, that's not good for folks that don't live there, because that was some scary stuff. We went out and the entire place was leveled, and they had a huge circus tent, and we had to get a couple of forklifts to roll this tent off the ground. And the biggest fear was there were going to be people under it. Thank God nobody was under this thing. But they said it ended up turning into a tornado. I don't know if it was where we were specifically it was a tornado, if it formed there. If they said it was more like straight line winds, but it ended up with a tornado in Calera. But I'll take blizzards and cold weather over that because, again, with the sirens going off all day and nothing happening, and then no sirens, and this happened, you just don't know. I don't know how well I would sleep. But again, if you're used to it, if you've got your radios and your sirens and things like that, you probably.
It's the same thing. We're not prepared for snow down here, but for tornadoes or severe weather like that, we're more used to that or whatever. So like, I do the reenactment in American Village every 4th of July. For those listening, if you're ever in Alabama around July or whatever, and you want to come out, the American Village in Montevallo, Alabama, does a wonderful 4th of July celebration, and it's become a tradition. They had to cancel last year because of the COVID, but it's awesome. But it never fails. There is a thunderstorm that comes about 3 o'clock, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon every year. It's almost like a tradition. We just wait for it. I've been doing it since I was in middle school, going out there on the 4th of July every year. I think there may have only been one year that there has not been a thunderstorm, but every year on the 4th of July, there's a thunderstorm that rolls through, and it's like I said, we wait for it. It's like, when is it going to come? It's kind of one of those things, but
Right.
And it rolls through, and like you said, and it's usually not bad. It just comes through and, thunders, lightnings, rains a little bit, and then next thing you know, it's sunny and twice as humid. And
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. I mean, we'll have blizzards here and snowstorms here, and the sun will come out shortly after that. Most of the time, it's cloudy, then it just gets brighter. But something like that, a thunderstorm or a tornado, especially, and then everything's peaceful, and then the sun's out and the skies are blue. It's just the strangest.
Yep.
The strangest thing. But I think it's a good time to thank everyone who's been listening to us, and we're getting some comments and some emails. Thank you so much for that. Some of our guests coming up are the results of these emails and suggestions. So we want to thank all of those folks for taking the time out of their day to send us a note or a text message. And Eric, why don't you give everyone our email address and how they can reach us if they want to make a comment or a suggestion or even want to be on the show.
Yes, if you would like to make a comment or suggestion or even would like to be on the show, you can reach us at itsanothersunday.podcast@gmail.com.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
We've come to the end of another episode. Any last words from you?
That's usually what people ask before you get sent to the gallows.
Cigarette?
Now, I'd like to thank all of our listeners out there in podcast land, wherever you may be, within the United States or anywhere around the world. We thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the show, and we hope that you will listen to many more episodes. And don't forget to roll with the changes.
It's Another Sunday Podcast is produced and directed by Erich and Gerry. Technical advisor Tom Billadew. Music composed and performed by Tom Blaze. Check out Tom Blaze's YouTube channel at Tom Blaze. A special thanks to all of our listeners out there who have joined us for each of these episodes. And a special thanks to Jake Novak for the idea with Alexa. That's it for It's Another Sunday Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I don't know that one.